Welcome to Cyber Soul, the podcast where we dive deep into the digital chaos, explore the messy truths behind cybersecurity, and ask the questions no one else seems to be asking. I'm your host, Keelin Conant, and around here, we don't pretend to have all the answers. What we do have is curiosity, bold conversations, and a mission to understand how we stay secure and human in a world that feels increasingly hacked, digitally and emotionally. Each week, we sit down with the people building, breaking, defending, and redefining the future. Whether it's quantum computing, ransomware, disinformation, or the people behind the breach, we're going there. So buckle up. It's time to dig beneath the firewalls and into the soul of cyber. Hey everyone, welcome back to the cybersoul.io, where we break down the complex, lift the veil on cyber truth, and explore how to stay human in the age of digital everything. I'm your host, Keelin Conant, and today we're stepping into the future. Quantum computing isn't just coming. It's actually here, and it's changing the rules of cybersecurity, trust, and the very fabric of encryption. I'm thrilled to be joined by John Young, COO of Quantum Emotion America. He's on the board of directors of Quantum Emotion. He's also a cybersecurity veteran, an IBM alumni, a teenage hacker, and another fun fact, one of only 11 people in the world to hold all 9 of the ISC2 certifications. And if you're wondering, ISC2 stands for International Information System Security Certification Consortium. John, thank you so much for being here.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So before we go totally quantum, what pulled you into the world of cybersecurity and what keeps you here?
A woman pulled me into the world of IT over 40 years ago and changed my life, basically. I couldn't get into IT. I'd been through an IBM programming school and I learned 4 languages, but in those days, that wasn't enough to break in. So I was working at a hotel on Harbor Boulevard in Costa Mesa and going to Orange Coast College at the same time to take more IT-related courses. This is like 1984. And she had put a little index card at the employment assistance for students at Orange Coast College, Community College, and I happened to see it, applied, and luckily enough, she picked me. And then what happened was we went from this 15-person company to a 250,000 person company, McDonnell Douglas, because she moved on and brought me with her shortly after. So that's how it happens in our field. If someone likes you, they will want to work with you again and, mentor you. And she was the best mentor I ever had.
That's awesome. I love that story. That's great. And the rest is history.
I wish I could find her. I've seen her in 30-something years, and it's a shame because she's a wonderful person. Yeah.
Well, I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. And let's switch gears a little bit to the future, really. So what exactly is quantum computing and why is it such a big deal for the future of cybersecurity?
It's a really big deal because we've been working in the binary world forever, ever since I started in the beginning. Really only had 2 choices, zeros or ones, on, off, true, false. And those were the states that computers could really work in. Then along comes quantum computing, and it can occupy the on, off state, 0, 1, but then it can also occupy all those states at the same time. So that changes everything as far as it can basically, be able to, say, flip a coin, right? And a regular computer, supercomputer even, would give you how many times out of 100 it would be tails or heads. But a quantum computer could see every angle of how it would fall. Would it be on its side? Would it be a heads? Would it be a tails? And when you can rearrange the options like that, it blows away the typical true false binary world that we've lived in. So that's really the danger, because then these computers are excellent at looking at mathematical problems and seeing them from all angles. And that's really where they're the danger, when it comes to encryption. We'll talk about that a little.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the encryption because that's really kind of what's keeping us safe right now, right? Is like our dependency on encrypting our data and passwords and all of those kind of layers of security. What do you see happening?
It's not just me. It's not really out in the mainstream yet. So we're talking about something that a lot of people may not know. If they've ever heard of Q Day, that's the day when quantum computers can crack the digital encryption. There's two types of digital encryption. There's symmetric and there's asymmetric. And symmetric is single key, and the asymmetric is two keys. PKI also, it's called public key infrastructure. And there's also a third option now that's called PQC, which is post quantum cryptography or post quantum encryption. And those are the algorithms that are approved by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, government based organization started, over 100 years ago. In fact, our electricity standards came from NIST. Any standard you can think of in the country is from NIST. So nowadays, the big thing that they're involved in, published thousands of pages of guidelines and recommendations and stuff like that, is on cybersecurity. And AI and quantum are really piling on now because only 3 years ago, no one knew what AI really was. And now I think quantum computing is sort of in the same boat as AI was 3 years ago, where people don't have that recognition yet because it hasn't gone mainstream. But uh, that's really a big danger because these quantum computers are not new. They've been around for a while, but there's been a big push in the last few years to really improve them. In fact, IBM just announced a month ago their Starling project, which is an error correcting quantum computer that they want to have in about 3 years or so. So that'll change the whole ball game because they think that it'll have 2,000 times the computational power of the quantum computers that we have now. So that's a real game changer to have an error correcting, fault tolerant computer because quantum computers now are more error prone than you'd like from a computer. And they're also more climate prone to having issues. Like the IBM System 2 has to be kept almost in a cryogenic chamber at minus, some crazy number, 20 something degrees, so it's super, super cold in there. And that's not the way things are going to be in the future. When I first started, the data centers and computer rooms were absolutely freezing,
Right.
very compressed air, and the noise was so loud. Now you go into a data center, it's quiet, it's cool, but not freezing cold where you need a sweater all the time. And there's no real pressurized air. And that's where quantum computers will go when they're standardized. Right now, it's kind of the Wild West. There's no standardization. Some of them look like beautiful sculptures, if you've ever seen them, with lights and really all gold parts, and they're gorgeous. And then you see these other ones, they look like a kid's high school science experiment, almost like cans with wires attached and going every which way. So that's really the key. Once it can be standardized, then that'll be a huge leap forward. And once the climate control issues are resolved, that'll change everything. Because at that point, it's not a leap to think that some of the goals of these companies, one just announced a month or so ago that they want to have a desktop quantum computer.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, with these climate challenges, you can't have that. No one's got a deep freeze in their house that they put their computer, but these folks are visualizing, almost like it was in the beginning. When I started, my first computer weighed over 2,000 pounds,
Right.
and it was made out of steel. And you open it up, and it was pretty empty. And yet, your phone has a million times more computational power than that big, giant, super mini computer that I had that cost a fortune. I mean, I had a $4 million supercomputer back in the 80s, and one of the boards, the motherboard, costs over $400,000 just to replace that. So when you think that a phone has more power than a whole block-long data center, you can see how Moore's law of doubling, computational power
Yeah.
and speed, just has made it exponential progression.
And what makes the quantum computer different from a regular computer or server? Is it a chip? Is there something, is it programming? What is it that's making it run so hot, first of all? And like, what are in the guts of it?
Yeah, it's called qubits, logical and physical qubits. So, instead of bits, they call them qubits. And that's really where the progress is being made now, is that they're looking to up the number of qubits that are in these computers. If they started at a low number, single
Right.
digits, and now, in the hundreds and thousands. And to do what we're talking about, breaking the encryption, it's estimated it'll take in the millions of qubits. And that sounds crazy, but it's not far out of reach, especially since now we have AI on the job
Right.
assisting. So whatever people that were really pointing out to a 20-year plus timeline for this to happen are working on models that were run a few years ago before AI was really so helpful and productive. So a lot of these things like AI, and also the investment that's being made by companies called, like IBM, Google, uh, Microsoft, uh, that's collapsing that time.
Right.
So that's really not that far out of reach. I think anyone who's thinking too far out, I wish it was true, because that would give us time to prepare. And anybody who worked through Y2K, like me, realizes there was hundreds of meetings that went into this for 5 years. And
Yeah.
all it was a very simple problem with a known date. If anyone doesn't know what Y2K is, it was simply that their date would roll over from 1999 to 1900 instead
1900.
of 2000, because resources in the early days for computers were pretty scarce. So the programmer said, hey, our programmers will never be run, you know, 50, 60 years
That
from now.
long. Right.
So let's hard code the 1 and the 9 for the rest of the century and we'll be good. And all they had to do was just incrementally add the last 2 digits. And then when Y2K was coming up, that was a real problem, because they were worried that things would come to a halt because everything would go back to 1900. So it was really an administrative problem. And, we knew what to do. It still was a $500 billion total global effort, $500
Yeah.
billion to make it the non-event. And that's what bothers me now, is a lot of the younger people, and even people who were around but just weren't in IT, said, oh, Y2K is nothing but hype, and nothing happened. But that shows
Because
that,
of the planning and
yeah,
the resources and that were put
it
into it.
was
That's why
different
nothing
to go
happened.
in there and do it. Consultants at that time made a fortune.
So I do remember daylight savings time was still a problem for a very long time after that, probably like a decade. Like the year was fixed, but maybe the timing wasn't
It's a
changed.
problem now. They want daylight savings time because it throws off people's body clocks and heart attacks and all kinds of things,
It's all
get
kinds.
used to it. But actually, yes, the digital daylight savings time and anything that had to do with time and scheduling, that was going to be an issue. Logging, if they were running older programs, newer programs, new programs, no problem. Older
Right.
programs, big problem. And you think, well, why are they running programs so old? It's because they worked. And
Yeah.
hacking wasn't a thing then, and no one was going to hack the time portion anyway. And they just kept patching these things up over the years, like
Hmm.
COBOL and Fortran. COBOL was a big Y2K exposure. I don't want to go too deep into it. But anyway, now we're looking at Q-Day, which is a whole different ball of wax, because 25 years later, we've jumped exponentially in the amount of use of digital assets, right? In those
Yeah.
days, no one had social media unless they were on a bulletin board typing in text, pictures just
Yahoo.
really more of a thing. It was more of a company focused thing,
Mm.
but now the companies have expanded it, and people, do all their online banking, their online shopping.
Yeah.
They basically, invest online, get their information. Everything's online. Facebook didn't
Everything.
exist. Google was just a search engine for the most part.
Shazam was
Apple,
just a text.
yeah, it was mainly text. So uh,
So,
now it's a total different world because
yeah.
it's not just a problem that's known of a 2-digit rollover and that we have to fix through all the programs. It's like, okay, everything in the world has a digital secrecy attached to it when it comes to the information. That's really the critical thing, is keeping this information safe. And if you are trying to find uses for it, my point is it's harder to find a company that doesn't need digital encryption as it is to, figure out where our markets are. Our markets are in, of course, anything that's doing healthcare, finance, crypto, government, military, of course. So everybody needs it.
Hmm.
There's really no companies anymore that are just doing stuff by, paper and not
Right.
using a computer. I mean, that's just crazy. They couldn't compete, right? So everybody's involved, and yet if Y2K was a fire drill, like some people said, then this is actually a skyscraper that's on fire, and yet no one's pulled the alarm yet.
So
That's
if
the
I'm
problem.
if I'm a business leader or a CIO or a CISO listening, what's one thing that I should start prepping for today? What's one active to get prepared?
They've got their hands full, actually. They've got more than one thing to prepare for because some of them are grappling with AI. Some of them are looking forward to AI because it allows them to reduce headcount in certain areas where they're
Right.
doing repetitive work. So they're looking at AI as a big bonus so they can cut their people costs, and yet they're worried about AI with data breaches, right? So the data breaches go hand in hand with what the hackers are doing. And that's they're harvesting the data now,
Yeah, they
knowing
are.
that they can't crack it, and then they're going to decrypt it later. So that's the
That
whole
Q-Day.
plan. And you say, why would a hacker, you know, care? Because they're not going to have a quantum computer in their bedroom, in the basement or garage. Well, what about bad actors from foreign countries that are always, hostile to each other and looking for an edge? The people there that are doing the work for their country think of themselves as patriots. So
Yep.
Americans may look at them as hostiles, and yet they look at Americans as hostiles, right?
Yep.
So when you look at it from both sides, they, especially in some of the countries that I worked in, former like Soviet Republic, the Eastern European countries, once they became independent, you had people with master's degrees and PhDs in computer science that were absolutely brilliant, and yet they were only making $500 a month American money.
Right.
So the incentive is there for them to go into, criminal activities, or even better, get some state-sponsored activity using their skills that they spent 15 years developing, and that's their first love, uh, and actually make a great living and have a great, lifestyle for them and their family. So what can executives do here? First is even be aware there's a problem, because
Yep.
that's a huge leap right there. It's really interesting because the people that are the most prepared for this right now are those doomsday preppers who
Yep.
are always
That's what I was
worried.
thinking about actually. Like you're like, no one has a deep freeze in their basement. And I was thinking about the preppers. I'm like, they probably do.
Yeah, they probably do it solar powered or off the grid, and they got a
Hmm.
diesel engine, and they got their bug out bag, they call it, with all their
Yep.
supplies. And I mean, it's really good. Earthquake preparedness is what we should have here in California. And most people don't even have water bottles, right? Or flashlights or all the
Yep.
basics. So they're totally as unprepared for an earthquake as businesses are unprepared for Q-Day. And part of it's awareness, part of it is like the news. When I first got here in 1977 in California, I kept hearing about the big one, the big one, the big one.
Mm.
And we had the Northridge quake, and that was pretty
92.
terrible. Then we had, one in San Francisco was really bad. And, but it's been a good almost 30 years now since we've had a monster quake. So it's quiet all on the Western Front. Plus, everything is sort of went from central news that people watched every night on only 3 channels,
Right.
ABC, CBS, and NBC. Now people get their news from everywhere. The news that they're getting isn't necessarily focused on emergency situations unless it's a current event, and they're not prepared. So getting back to that point, the people that are actually the most prepared for this are the ones that are going down the rabbit holes looking for some kind of apocalyptic event when this thing is staring everybody right in the face.
Right in the face. Yeah.
And it's a real thing. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. That's a real issue.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I'd love for you to tell us more about quantum emotion and how you guys are, facing that through the encryption. But I think you guys are out there in the community a lot. I mean, I see a lot of your press releases and how you're growing. So how does your tech actually help to defend in the quantum future?
There's a silver bullet that people think, which is the approved NIST algorithms, the PQC, post-quantum cryptography, the encryption that is quantum resistant. But I see a real Achilles heel in that. And it's based on what's called PRNG, pseudo random number generation, which is math based. So if anyone saw Apple TV's Prime Target,
Mm-hmm.
they'd understand what I'm talking about, because it's actually a very realistic scenario. And give the plot away, just the setup is that this math-based genius in England, who's considered as great as Isaac Newton, and he is searching for what he calls the prime finder, which is a way to discover all the prime numbers. Now, when you look at the PRNG, it's mostly based on prime numbers. Prime numbers are numbers that can only divide by themselves or 1. So every even number is out, right? Because it could be divided by 2.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a very exciting, dramatic series. People are getting killed left and right. Once an episode, a head of an intelligence agency said every digital secret in the world is going to be vulnerable. It's going to be broken. We got it. So they're killing his professors. They're killing people. It's incredible, right? But the whole premise of it is actually true, that if the algorithm as its basis has some kind of pattern that can be tracked back, the quantum computers will eat that up for breakfast. That's what they do. A supercomputer, and Google proved this, work on this mathematical equation, could work on it 100 years and not get it. Whereas their new souped up quantum computer was able to do it in a matter of hours and, maybe minutes. So that's the difference between a quantum computer and the regular classical computers. So where do we fit in? This is a major problem, and the PQC, post-quantum cryptography encryption, is a definite major great move. So if you imagine this problem as a big giant circle,
Mm-hmm.
as a solution, we only have a small piece of the solution, quantum emotion, but what we provide is what I feel is the critical aspect of it, because it solves that problem of math-based random number generation. That's why it's called QRNG, because we use quantum physics instead of math.
Math, regular math.
And encryption's been broken routinely over the years.
Yeah.
You've seen them come and go. And that's because mathematicians get better computers and they're able to work on it and track back the pattern, and they can see, it's not so random after that. But the beautiful thing is what we provide is pure randomness that is also referred to entropy. So what we have is entropy as a service, basically. So we could be plugged in to these PQC quantum resistant algorithms that are approved by NIST, which would really fortify them quite well. But we could also be plugged into the classical encryption, like the RSAs and SHAs and all of the other ones that are floating around that are more easily cracked by the quantum computers if they still use the seed and key generation from PRNG. So it might be a little deep for the audience to go into that. We're
That's
getting
okay,
into
because I mean, I knew you had to get nerdy. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. I'm an 80s kid. I freaking love the show Quantum Leap. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering, of course, there's always fear around AI and the quantum computing. And yes, it can cause us a lot of issues in the way our structure is today. But thinking ahead and maybe thinking a little sci-fi, what are some of the benefits that quantum computing can provide us? I mean, is time travel an option? Do we
It's
know?
interesting because something just came out, quantum teleportation.
Yes.
Uh,
I'm also a Star
had,
Trek nerd
yes,
too.
yeah, Star Trek, tribute there. But
Beam me up, Scotty.
there's some proof of concept that there could actually be some form of teleportation of information
Yeah.
through what's called entanglement. It really gets into the physics of it, but basically you could put particles, on different sides of the universe, and the distance of light years, and all of that. It's just mind-boggling how many years it would take us to get to our closest star, according to
Right.
the speed of light. But apparently, these mirror particles can sense when one of them changes state. It could be at the far, far distance, and they'll know instantaneously that it changed state, and they'll change state too. So it's really
Cool.
getting into the murky realm there.
The
Uh,
philosophical kind of side of things, probably.
yeah, I mean, it's not philosophical. It actually is proven,
Yeah.
proven thing that's what physics are based on. Maybe our physics are wrong. Every 10 years, you know, Big Bang turns out to be something else. The guy that got a Nobel Prize for, his idea interpretation of how the whole universe started is now coming out and saying, "Oh, what I said was wrong." So we're constantly reevaluating where we're at, but
True.
there's mysteries out there that are pretty amazing. They're at our fingertips, and that's what the quantum computers could help with. Are they good at storage? No. They're not good at the mundane things, but anything that's math-based calculation, stuff like that, it's going to take us to another level. And the way I think of it is this: computing now, the way we have it, even the supercomputers, it's like being on the Earth and looking at the moon. And quantum computing is like being on the moon and seeing all of the universe stretched out there. And that's the difference between them.
That's
We're
cool.
getting there at a light speed, basically, that isn't being, matched by a lot of other things in our society, like the safeguards. So that's where
Yeah.
we come in, that we're providing a critical solution. And we're going through the process of all these certifications to hopefully be used as a source of entropy for those encryptions and recognized by NIST and all that. It's all a process,
It's
it's
pretty
a
cool.
neat
Yeah,
thing.
it's fun to watch it grow, and I look forward to seeing it all happen. I don't know if I look forward to Q Day, but I do have one more question for you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Actually, Wired broke an article a few months ago that talking about the coming apocalypse of Q Day, and they had all of these horrible scenarios. And the only thing was they didn't really go too deeply into the solution. They talked about PQC a little, but they didn't really go into that much. And that's why I'm saying PQC for the post quantum encryption is great, but there's that Achilles heel that we can buffer up. And it's not just us, too. If we were the only ones doing this, then that would almost say you're in the wrong business.
Mhm.
If you have
Yeah,
no competitors, it's almost like
right.
you're so far out in left field, it's not really a thing. But people have been doing quantum random number generation for 25 years, but it's through different methods. They use, it was initially for photonics, which required an optical device, was bulky, could be miniaturized. Where we're leading the way is a thing called electron tunneling. And that's something that we've been able to successfully miniaturize. And we have TSMC, huge chip manufacturer in Taiwan. They've been working on, they finalized our design, and we're going into, testing of the first batch that's actually, proved. So this is a game changer in the way that the Google chip for quantum and the Microsoft quantum chips, Major N1 and Willow, right? Every time they make an announcement on a chip, everybody's stock does a big float. It is any relationship to quantum. So what that means to us is that our miniaturization of this single chip would allow us to be in every single device in the world. So that could, provide security for the Internet of Things devices, every router, every computer, every telephone, every tablet, so that's a huge undertaking to do something like that. So getting back to our competitors, I think the scope of it is so big that even if all of our competitors join forces with us, we don't have the ability to scale up to meet the demand. That's why we're going to need the governments to do what they did, sort of like Y2K, which was that worldwide alliance to make sure that it was minimalized. And we're going to need some, big brother and big sister telecom and electronics and computer companies to kind of join forces and really help society as a whole, because this is a society problem. I wouldn't want to be on an airplane and suddenly the pilots lose track of the tower, and the tower, air traffic controllers lose track of them and all their planes. And that's not a far-fetched thing, because only a month or so ago at Newark Airport, they lost track of their planes for 90 seconds. Not only 90 seconds, but hundreds of planes are flying around. And what does that mean? Well, if you extrapolate that out, 90 seconds through a telecom outage, not a breach or anything like that, just a simple 90-second telecom outage caused huge issues, right? So imagine if instead of ransomware, someone takes over, knocks out the air traffic system and holds that sort of as a ransom situation. We're not going to let you communicate until, you pay us in Bitcoin somewhere,
Right.
And that's actually, not an unrealistic situation. Or utilities, right? You want some
utilities is big.
person stumbling around in a nuclear facility, that's one of the nuclear reactors around the country. We have something like 97 or something. And basically, learning on the job, that's not something you do OJT, right?
Right.
You can't use a manual and figure out how to set controls for a nuclear reactor or how to cool it down. So we have people that could be stumbling around and actually cause a meltdown, cause a dam to release water. It's really, the Wired article goes into it quite well, so I'm not going to relive the apocalyptic points of it. But the good thing that you talked about, I think quantum computers can help medicine. Maybe it'd be life extension, right? New drugs. AI is already doing that. So combine AI with quantum computers, and then you extrapolate that even further out. You've got an AI swarm, which is multiple AIs working with, instead of a quantum computer, a quantum network. And, suddenly we're, going in a direction that is the greatest minds of all time, all combined, working on a single problem and it's getting solutions instantaneously. I mean, they could just, move a molecule around here or there, and that'll change, composition of some kind of medicine. So there's some outstanding, great things that can be happening. That's the positive side. The negative side is that there's a whole bunch of people out there that just, think that it's twice as satisfying to steal something as it is to earn it,
Right.
In this movie with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise, The Color of Money, about pool hustling, there's like a famous line. Paul Newman says, money won is twice as sweet as money earned.
Mm.
So a lot of people have this philosophy in the criminal world. They think it's too hard to go out and get a regular job. They'd rather do stuff like this. So we've got the patriots, who are the bad actors for foreign countries. They're a
Yep.
hero for them. We've got the terrorists who just want to destroy things. We've got the hackers in there for money, and we've got people that are just playing at it too. So there's all these forces out there, and you say, oh, they can't really get a quantum computer. Well, they could do what I did in the 80s. Learning the program, I had to buy time on a mainframe
Right.
because there was no PCs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn the hard way. So it was easy, just buy some time on a mainframe, and they're doing that right now. They're selling
With the
time
quantum.
on a quantum computer, but it's not as powerful yet to be able to break the harvested data that they have. So that's one of the good things, is that if we can get the word out, and I'm doing a lot of, as you've seen, a lot of mainstream media stuff, and it's bubbling to the top. So that's really important, is just really the awareness. And you would ask me what executives can do. Well, the government passed what was called HR 7535, a bill that was proposed by Conant. He's a California congressman. And it became basically the Quantum Preparedness, Cybersecurity Awareness Act. And what that did was it started telling the government, you've got to prepare, and you've got to use post-quantum, encryption for this, and the vendors have to be ready by certain dates. So I ran some models, and the government is probably like 42% prepared right now.
Mm.
Bigger businesses, I'm talking mega corporations, are probably 18%. But the sad part is small, medium businesses, for the most part, are in single digits as far as preparedness goes, because they're not even aware of it. I went to a big summit of COOs, and there were 10 COOs of major companies sitting next to me, and CEOs and presidents. And we started talking about Q-Day, and only about 2 out of 10 knew what it was all about. So that's part of my role, is to
Your
be an
mission.
advocate for awareness for this, and spread the news. And pretty soon, I have a feeling it'll be like Y2K. People will start hearing about it more. That'll change everything, because then we'll start to get more attraction. But the thing is, the government is aware of it. They have laws in place to be prepared, and there's nothing for business yet. It's all
Mm.
government related. So,
Right.
we're on our own when it comes to that. And that's where we come in, because we can, work with these vendors and these organizations in any industry, basically, and they could plug in our services and our product, and basically entropy, randomness is what, is the real key. And quantum computers are lost on that. They need
Yes.
something to be based on. And I'll tell you
Awesome.
something else, for Q-Day that's really not talked about, even the people that know. But what is AI going to do when Q-Day comes? Because AI depends on the substructure, infrastructure that is the digital world. We talk to AI, chat with it like it's a person, but basically it's not. Of course, it's a computer, and
Right.
programming, and everything underlying is what it depends on. So these X.509 certificates that are used, and these public keys, and all of that it depends on, to be sure it's doing so. And what's it going to do when it can't trust the
Right.
origin of the key, or of some kind of certificate? And that's when it can fall into what's being called now AI panic. AI is not a person; you can't really panic, but its actions could simulate panic in the way that it could have paralysis by analysis and just not
Well, and it
function.
hallucinates, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
not quite sure what to
Well,
do, it
in that
starts
case,
to.
it's making crazy wrong decisions.
Right.
So
Yep.
we don't really know what it's going to do, fight or flight or freeze. And that's another big thing that
Question mark
can
that.
come out of it. The more control we give to the AI, by the time this Q day hits, then it can create even more, catastrophic destruction too. I don't think a lot of people realize how fragile our food supply chain is, because a lot of things have to be delivered just in time. That's actually a methodology I learned about in the 80s, just in time. When you deal with food, you don't want it stacking up in the warehouse forever, even though it's kind
Right.
of beneficial in a way for the non-perishables, that they
But
can,
bananas, man, I'm a banana eater, and my
yeah,
gosh, is it
yeah, you'll
is
be
it
out of
a
luck.
thing?
Yeah. If some small provider who is part of the supply chain for bananas for a certain region, gets breached and they're suddenly out of business for all intents and purposes. Well, that's the link that breaks the supply chain in that
Totally.
area. So just look
Yeah.
at COVID as an example, right? I go into the store and there's no toilet paper, there's no bleach, there's no
Nothing.
disinfectant, there's no gloves. That's bad enough, but just imagine if it's food, right?
Hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to talk to people about, is that Q-Day will expose the fragility of our supply chain and show that you know we could actually be on the verge of starving if
Yeah.
if this actually comes to pass.
So
Because
it
just think
sounds,
all the bad things that can happen in your mind and invert back, like Charlie Munger. He's Warren Buffett's. He was Warren Buffett's right hand man. He just passed
protege.
away at 99 years old. But he used to talk about his way of thinking. It was called inverting. And he would think of the worst possible scenario and then backtrack. So, how to avoid having that happen? And that was based on when he was in World War II, he would deploy pilots. So he would have to figure out what would kill the pilots, and he would backtrack and take out of the equation anything that could put him in that situation of bad weather or known attack areas. And, he had a very safe record, right? Well, that's what we kind of have to do with Q-Day, is look at all the bad things and at least hit the big ones first, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, it just sounds like, and I've had other conversations about this, is that it really planning and preparation and having open conversations in the industry and outside of it is going to be the thing that saves us, quote unquote, is to have those conversations and
yeah,
trust in new technology such as quantum emotion.
yeah. We want to, definitely do whatever we can with our cutting edge technologies to benefit society and become a major player in it. And people say to me, well, what about, you know, harvest now, decrypt later? Isn't the
Mm,
cat out of the bag if they're already collecting all this data? And I'm saying, yes, that's true. That's the point. We have to get in there as soon as possible and stop the bleeding. Just because a
yeah,
patient is
yeah,
bleeding doesn't mean that you just let it bleed, keep bleeding and let the person bleed out, right?
yeah,
That only, you know, makes the situation worse. So if we keep pumping out new data that they keep capturing and more people start piling on, getting on the bandwagon, then it just makes the problem that much worse. So yeah, let's stop it. I mean, the horse has left the barn on a lot of things. Look at it. The Equifax breach,
yeah,
146 million personal records for a major credit bureau, mine, probably yours included, because
sure.
uh, that's the social security numbers of, put in perspective, 146 million people. There's only 120 million people in the United States working
Right.
full time.
Yeah,
So they got the social security numbers of kids that work part time, people that retired, So if a hacker has that information, sells it for only $10, social security number, which that thing is gold. When you have someone's social security number, the rest is easy to compile. You could build a whole identity right off of that, and many
well, and
people have done
I like what you said is it's stopping the bleeding, because one of the things I talk about a lot on this podcast is it too late? Like there's a lot of people who are like, well, they already have all my data. And it's like, well, they might have it, but how do we circumvent them using it? And that piece of what you guys are offering is really important. So I really appreciate just, you taking the risks that you have in your career and being, a sounding board for cybersecurity. You're one of the cybersecurity OGs. because you've been in the industry and have grown up with it. So I really appreciate that you're still at the front edge of it, and I think that's really awesome. I know we talked a lot about a lot of dark scenarios today, but I am of the ilk of we're humans and we're gonna get through it. There was a lot of fear around industrial revolution, around probably when the wheel was invented. So I am the ultimate optimist, and I think technology can be detrimental, but it also can serve us in many ways. So I really appreciate this conversation, and thank you so much. You helped make quantum understandable, but also actionable. So it helped me understand quantum as well, which is just such an interesting subject. Audience, if you're listening and you want to dive deeper into this space, you can connect with John on LinkedIn or check out the Quantum Emotion America. When you do that, they will send out press releases. There's something new happening like once a week. I mean, it's probably happening even more than that, but you guys are really great at keeping people updated, and I appreciate that. So until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, if the future is coming fast, you better show up prepared.
Thank
Happy Q
you.
Day. Bye.